Hi, it's Steph, and I'm at the Home Depot, and this store has just received the largest shipment of spring inventory, and I cannot wait to share it with all of you. Perennials, annuals, trees, shrubs, and evergreens. So let's take a look at the April inventory at the Home Depot. Friends, if you have spring fever, I have just the cure. Look at these beautiful plants. This is Icelandic poppies, and they are stunning. It's such a whimsical plant above this wiry stem and this tuft of foliage. And look at them, they look like tissue paper flowers. So beautiful. I'm actually going to bring one home. This is what they look like. They are listed as perennial. I've always had mixed results with planting Icelandic poppies as a perennial. I've planted them before, they haven't returned, but it's not gonna stop me from trying again. They say they are deer resistant. I do know that poppies like a soil that drains well, so it does not like to sit in soggy soil, and they like full sun. And they bloom late spring through midsummer, and these are loaded with buds. Look at that. Gorgeous. These are $19.98 and they are a number 3 container. And once in a while you find a really good gem at the Box Store Garden Center, and here is today's find, hellebore. These are not very common at these nurseries. Usually you find them at specialty nurseries, and they're quite expensive, almost double the price that you're gonna find them for here, which is amazing, by the way. $17.98 for this hellebore in the Vigoro container, which is a house brand here at the Home Depot. Now hellebore are a part shade or shade perennial. They are beautiful. They're also known as Lenten rose because they usually bloom during the season of Lent. They have the most beautiful flowers, and these blooms last for a really long time. They start blooming in very early spring. Mine are currently in bloom in my garden and looking lovely. They are also deer resistant, and their foliage, which is a really large leathery leaf like this, is mostly evergreen. Here in my zone 6B7A, I mostly keep this foliage up as a nice ground cover, and then they start looking a little tattered just about the time where they send up these beautiful blooms. So then it is time to go in, clean up all the old foliage just by following the stem down to the base of the plant, cutting, and then once the plant is done blooming, it'll push out all brand new beautiful foliage. But these are a gorgeous perennial to add to your garden for very early spring color in an apart shade to shade location. Pink phlox, which is just getting ready to be in full bloom. This is a beautiful spring ground cover. I have mine planted all around daffodils. So right now my daffodils are in bloom, and just about when the daffodils are done, these will show up and give us these really beautiful dainty blooms. It grows really well kind of over retaining walls, rock gardens. They like a pretty well draining soil that leans dry, and they do very well and spread over time. They grow wider than they do tall, so they're very low growing, only about 6 inches or so in height, but can get about 20 or so inches, 18 to 24 inch spacing. So 6 inches in height and can get up to 2 feet in width, and super easy to transplant and divide. You basically just take a chunk out of the soil and plant it somewhere else. I've spread mine around, shared it with friends. Really great perennial, likes full sun and deer resistant. These are number 3 containers of phlox for $19.98. And you know what you can do is you can buy this container right here, and you can divide it in 4 sections and get 4 plants out of this, making them only about $5 a piece. I do that all the time. Divide perennials right out of the container. So this one looks like it's a striped pink and white. They also have this beautiful pink color here, and they also have some that are mixed pink and purple. They also come in shades of white. So a lot of options when it comes to the ground cover creeping phlox. Celine, another really beautiful spring bloomer, and the blooms look very similar to phlox. Look, they're right on the side of each other, and you can see how similar they are. Really pretty. So this is a tip, friends. Make sure you go to the nursery throughout all of the seasons, not just in the beginning of spring or in the middle of summer, because this is how you get a garden that blooms for the whole season, by adding plants that are available at different times of the growing season. So here is some dianthus. This one is like a little carnation type flower. The foliage is really pretty, usually like a grayish blue color. And this one has a little bit of height on it. It doesn't tell me the variety. It just looks like it'll be like a rose or fuchsia colored bloom, and $19.98 for this number 3 container, which is the same price as last year for these larger cans here at the Home Depot. They have some ornamental grasses, the Calamagratis Carl Forrester. This is my favorite ornamental grass because it is very compact. It only gets to be about 3 to 4 feet in height and about 2 feet in diameter. Very well behaved. And in the fall, you'll get these really pretty plumes that make them look like wheat, which transition beautifully with the seasons. So I really love this to add movement and texture in a floral bed, in a planting bed. Really great to add some perennial grasses. And these here are $24.98 for a number 3 container. And the hydrangeas are in, and here's one that I haven't seen before, the City Line Paris Big Leaf Hydrangea. Now these big leaf hydrangeas typically bloom on old wood, so you have to be a little more careful when you prune them so that you don't risk lopping off that year's blooms. Where the paniculata type hydrangeas bloom on new wood, so you can prune them down and they will still bloom beautifully for you that year. So something to know about these big leaf hydrangeas. This one is by Proven Winners, and it looks like it's going to have a fuchsia or rose toned bloom. And let's see how big they are. That is gorgeous. Look at that picture. So these are hardy in USDA growing zones 5 through 9 or down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit. And it's compact. Look at this. A petite shrub gets to be 1 to 3 feet tall and wide. That is wonderful. You can tuck this into any little flower bed, which is great. And it likes sun or part shade. I do find that the big leaf hydrangeas typically prefer a little more shade, especially in the afternoon when the sun can get a little harsh. But they're being bred to be able to handle more sun these days, which is excellent. And these containers here are a number 2 for $29.98. Some tough stuff which is a mountain type hydrangea. You can usually tell the mountain type hydrangeas, also known as lace caps, because they will have blooms around the edges and almost like this little cluster in the center. They almost look glittery to me, which is really pretty. And here it is another picture in the pink. Now whether they'll be blue or pink or even purple depends on the acidity of your soil. If you have a more acidic soil, they'll be more blue, and if you have a more alkaline soil, they will lean pink or purple. So these here are hardy in zones 5 through 9 or down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit, and they're also petite. They get to be 2 to 3 feet tall and wide, and they're reblooming, which is awesome because after the initial flush, you'll still get some sporadic reblooming, which is what you want from a shrub. You want it to keep pumping out flowers for you, right? And this is a number 2 for $29.98. And some lilacs, which are a quintessential spring blooming shrub and have a wonderful fragrance. This one is by Proven Winners. It's the Bloomerang Dark Purple reblooming lilac. That's something new that they're doing with lilacs over the last several years, is breeding reblooming varieties. So you get that big initial flush in spring, and then towards the end of summer, beginning of fall, you'll get some more sporadic reblooming. So this one here gets to be 4 to 6 feet tall and wide, and is hardy in zones 3 through 7. And it says it's a 3-season lilac, and it likes 6+ hours of sun per day in order for it to set blooms and bloom best. And these here are a number 2 container for $29.98. And a butterfly bush, which pollinators love, butterflies, bees. They are really fragrant too. I find that the blooms smell very similar to lilac blooms. This is a first edition shrub called Funky Fuchsia, and it's got these large fuchsia pink blooms. These like a soil that leans dry, so think of them kind of like a sedum, and they love full sun. This one here has a rounded, upright, tidy habit, and it says that it likes full sun, fragrant, deer resistant, 6 to 8 feet tall and wide. And this buddleia, which is the other name for butterfly bush, is in a number 3 container for $36.98. And the PJM rhododendrons here at my store are starting to bloom. Now these are also known as the smaller leaf rhododendrons, and they bloom before the big leaf rhododendrons. So here's an example of the big leaf right on the side. You can see that the leaves are quite a bit larger. And the PJM usually has smaller, darker foliage, and they bloom first. So it's nice to have a variety of different spring blooming shrubs that will bloom at different times. You can have the small leaf rhododendron, the large leaf. You can also have lilacs and azaleas, which makes it a really pretty spring show. And even these beauties here, the Japanese Pyrus, also known as Pyrus japonica. Look at all of these beautiful white bell-shaped blooms. Gorgeous. So this one here, the PJM Elite Rhododendron, likes part sun. They're pretty petite too in comparison to the large leaf rhododendron. These only get to be 4 to 5 feet in height and 3 to 5 foot spacing, and they bloom mid to late spring. They're hardy down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. The larger leaf rhododendrons here, these here are purple ones. They come in purple, pink, white. I have one called Nova Zembla that's a fuchsia color. They can get quite large, but there are different sizes as well. So this is the most common that you see, the English rosum, rhododendron. They also like part sun, but you can see that this one gets 4 to 10 feet in height and needs 11-foot spacing, hardy down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. They can take quite a bit of cold, but sometimes you will see the leaves start drooping downward. Perfectly normal. It's just because they're cold. Once it warms up, they perk back up. I will tell you that the deer in my garden are very attracted to the blooms. So once they start budding up, I do have to protect them by spraying them with some repellent or even putting netting over them over the winter. But really beautiful evergreen shrubs for the garden. These rhododendrons are smaller containers. They look like a number 1 for $17.98, which will make them more affordable and easier to plant. But rhododendrons are slow growers, so if you want something that will have instant impact, go for a larger container if you can. And this PJM is a number 3 container for $34.98. My store also has some really large rhododendrons in stock. These are the purple rhododendrons. They also have the pink, the English rosum, in number 3 containers for $44.98. Here is the Japanese purist. This one is called Purity and it has a white bloom. These are also beautiful evergreen shrubs. Here is the foliage on them. They stay green all year, and then the new foliage that emerges usually has a bit of a red tint to it. Very pretty. And then of course, a really early bloomer. So very late winter, they start to swell up the buds, and then in early spring, they bloom. I have 2 pink ones in my garden and I love them. This one here also likes part shade. I have them planted in a woodland area of the garden. A number 3 container for $29.98. And another lilac. This one is all budded up. Look at that. This is a Miss Kim. I have one of these in my garden. Lovely. It also is very fragrant. You can see by the photo there. Deer resistant. I do find that the deer leave it alone in my garden. And it's very compact. Only gets to be 3 to 5 feet tall and wide. Grows in a nice kind of rounded habit. And they like full sun. Generally, most flowering shrubs like full sun, with the exception of the things like the rhododendrons that we looked at, azaleas, and even the purus, which can take more shade. And the Miss Kim lilac is in a number 3 container for $29.98. Look at these beautiful and bright red Japanese maples. These are certainly a wonderful landscape focal point tree that you can add in a front garden, and they're just really stunning. Make a beautiful contrast against all of the green in the garden. You can see there's a green rhododendron right behind it, and then look how beautiful this red looks. Now let's check out the tag and see if there's a variety on these. Usually they carry the bloodgood, which is a very common, easily found variety of Japanese maple. These are a part shade tree, but with time they can certainly take more sun if they get adequate water. They're usually medium-sized trees, getting anywhere from 15 to 20 feet in height and about 15 to 20 feet in width. Now the tag just reads Acer palmatum. It doesn't tell me what variety it is. And Acer palmatum usually refers to the shape of the leaves. It's got like a 5-lobed leaf. These are still small, so hard to tell. They're still leafing out, but very beautiful trees. And these here are number 3 for $69.98. I just happened to look at these bare root roses, and look at this, a climbing Eden. What? These are gorgeous. Now, if you've been around my channel for a while, you know that me and roses don't get along so well. I actually have a rose ICU, dug them out of a bed that stood a little too moist where the roses were unhappy, and now I'm growing them in pots. But you know what? That's not going to stop me from picking this one up today. So pretty. $16.98. It says it gets to be 8 to 12 feet in height, and from what I understand, the Eden can almost take part shade where most roses prefer full sun. Let me know in the comments if you have any information on that, but I'm going to go ahead and pick this beauty up. Here's how I pick out the rose that I'm going to take home. I just look at it, make sure it has at least 3 good-sized canes, the thickness of a pencil or more. I can tell that they already have some eyes or buds that are starting to swell, and it has a decent shape, where in contrast to this one on the side of it has a couple of deadwood canes, so I probably wouldn't pick this one. So I am going to grab this one to take home. When I'm picking out a perennial, I want to find one that isn't all bloomed out. You can see that those there already have lots of blooms, but I want to plant it in my garden and get to enjoy it for as long as possible. So I'm going to pick this one that's still pretty much all closed. Flowering trees, they have dogwoods, and this one here is the Cherokee Princess, which is a white blooming dogwood. Now these are beautiful trees. They're also pretty slow growing. So if you can afford to get one that's a little bit bigger, then I probably would suggest doing that, especially if you're a little impatient. But if you have the time and you don't mind, these are really affordable at $34.98. These are part sun trees. trees or understory trees. They like to be planted under the canopy of larger trees so that they'll get a little bit of afternoon shade, but they do acclimate to quite a bit of sun after some time. They're a medium-sized tree, only getting to be about 15 to 20, 25 feet tall and wide. And they are day resistant. I find that they don't really touch my buds on my dogwood. So far, so good. These spring blooming trees are just starting to break dormancy now, and there's one that's catching my eye here with some red foliage, so we'll take a look at that. But look at these weeping cherry trees. These are stunning. They make such an impact in a front yard as a focal landscape tree. This one, the snow fountain cherry, look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? It likes full sun. It gets to be 8 to 12 feet in height. Generally, the weeping trees are a little bit smaller in stature. They can get quite wide, but they're usually pretty compact in terms of height. And it gets to be, it needs 6 to 10 foot spacing, so not bad. And hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit, blooms mid-spring. So this would be a pretty decent sized tree for a smaller to medium sized yard. So if you do have space limitations in your garden, look for weeping habits. They generally stay more compact. And these trees here are in a pretty good sized container for $130. Let's see what size they are. Number 10. These red foliage trees are crab apples. Now, they don't have a tag, so I can't identify the exact variety. I'm going with it being a prairie fire because I have seen those here before. But they get these really pretty pink blooms and they have dark foliage, which is really pretty and adds another level of interest to the garden. Now, if I were to pick out one of these trees here at the Home Depot, they are a great price, $84.98 for this container, which is a number 7. What I would recommend is pulling the tree away from the bunch and taking a look at it to see if you get a nice rounded shape. Because sometimes these trees can be a little wonky in that they have a face, right? One side looks really good, the back can be kind of flat. So you certainly want to look at the tree on all sides. Found a tag, and so it isn't the prairie fire crabapple that I thought. It is the perfect purple, which also has some purple foliage or red foliage. Now, crab apples are great because they get these little apples or these fruits that the birds love. This one still has one here. So it will flower in spring. You still have interest with the beautiful foliage, and then you get fruit, I believe towards the tail end of summer, beginning of fall, that the birds love. Now, with crab apples, there is the varieties that have the persistent fruit and the non-persistent. The persistent hangs onto the tree a bit better. The non-persistent can drop and sometimes be messy. So if that's something that would concern you, something to think about. The time of year where you drive around and you see all of these beautiful spring blooming trees and you think, well, I should add one of those to the garden. Yes, you should. The best time to plant a tree was yesterday. The next best time is now. And look at this one, the Japanese flowering cherry Kwanzan. It has pink blooms, garden showpiece, outstanding color. So these like full sun and get to be 20 to 25 feet in height and need 20-foot spacing. Hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And look, it's all budded. Getting ready to put on the bloom show. Flowering cherry trees are $84.98 for a number 7 container. One of my favorite spring bloomers is the Eastern redbud, and it is native. And this one here gets these really beautiful kind of purple pink blooms. You can see that they bloom all along the stems. And then once it's done blooming, it will push out these beautiful heart-shaped leaves that stay green all summer. And in the fall, they turn gold. So a really pretty tree. I will tell you that I don't find them to be the strongest trees because they're very top heavy. If you have one on a single stem like this, sometimes in a big windstorm, you can lose a couple of branches, which mine has lost a few branches. So if I knew then what I know now, I would get a multi-trunk tree because I find them to be a little bit sturdier, but nonetheless I would plant one all over again, the Eastern redbud. They like full sun and they get to be 20 to 30 feet in height and need 30-foot spacing, hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And here are some hydrangeas in a standard form, or what some people call the hydrangea trees. Now, while I love hydrangeas, I do not prefer the standard form hydrangeas. I actually had some planted in my garden and I removed them, and I'll give you the reason why. They get too top heavy, and I don't think that they were naturally intended to grow that way. So what happens is with those big, large blooms on top, they tend to topple over when there's too much wind or they're not staked properly, especially when they're young and not well rooted in. So I prefer just a regular old big hydrangea shrub and pick trees of other varieties. But if you like them, they do have some available. This one here is the hydrangea pink diamond. The blooms are kind of open, so they might be a little bit lighter than the limelights that I had. They look more like a firelight type hydrangea. They get to be 10 feet in height, large blooms, garden showpiece. They are really beautiful. The practicality of it just wasn't for me in my garden. They bloom late summer to fall, and they need 10-foot spacing, hardy down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And these hydrangea standards here are $89.98 in the Home Depot house container. See this wild tree right here? Gorgeous. It's a willow, but the thing with willows is that they need lots of water. So if you have a septic or a well where you live, I would probably stay away from getting one of these because they will seek out water and it could become problematic and damage some of those items in your garden. That is the reason I haven't planted one yet. But if you have an area where you live maybe on the edge of a river or a pond, and you can sustain the watering on one of these, they are beautiful and such a statement tree. Look at this. They get to be 30 to 40 feet in height, have these gorgeous weeping branches and foliage, and they are hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And these here are, let's see, $79.98. And a patio peach, which is an ornamental peach shrub or tree. Look at how loaded this is with buds. It is going to be stunning when this blooms pretty soon. And the other beautiful thing about these patio peaches is that not only do they get beautiful blooms, but they also have dark foliage. Look at this. It makes a really beautiful accent. Because they're pretty compact, you can grow them on your patio in a planter. They only get to be 4 to 6 feet tall and wide, and they're hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. So zones 5 through 8, give or take. And they bloom in late spring, $69.98. Lots of fruit trees still available here at my store. In general, the prices are around $69.98. They have cherries, plums, apples, pears, and apricots. And look at these. The apricots are already in bloom or breaking bud. Look at that. Beautiful. So that's another great feature of fruit trees. Not only do they provide you fruit after a few years, but they also give you beautiful blooms in the spring. Are you looking to install a privacy hedge or a living fence this spring? Well, now's the time to do it because Home Depot is fully stocked on arborvitaes. They have two varieties. They have the green giants in a number 7 container, and they also have the emerald green in a number 7 container, and they have bulk pricing, $59.98, or if you buy 10 or more, $53.98 on both the emerald green and the green giant. There are some key differences between the emerald green arborvitae and the green giant, which would be important for you to research before you decide which one to plant in your garden. I do have a video that I created with real life application of both of these types of trees that I can link below for you to check out. And I just spotted another gem. So once in a while, like I said, you will find these rare plants. Today we have found the hellebore, we found the Eden climber, and now we see a beautiful Hinoki fern spray gold conifer. Look at this. These are stunning. I have one in my garden and I'm absolutely obsessed with it. I love that it has this really graceful, kind of loose growth habit. I love that it has these golden tips, adds a lot of interest to the garden, and it's evergreen. So even when the garden is dormant in the winter months, you still have something really beautiful to look at. So look at this, the Hinoki cypress fern spray gold likes full sun, very compact at only 6 to 12 feet in height for an evergreen. That is excellent. Needs 4 to 8 foot spacing, and it is hardy down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. And you want to know the best part? Not only is it beautiful, it's only $29.98. And this is what I mean about finding rare gems at the Home Depot Garden Center. Sometimes you find these scores and it just makes the trip worth it. And they have some number 3 containers of green giants for $19.88, which is a great price. And they're easier to plant because they're a little bit smaller, and these grow super fast. So if you have a smaller budget, or you don't want to spend a ton, or you don't want to have the work to plant the larger ones, these would work just fine for $19.88 each. So many gorgeous evergreens. Look at this. And these are sky pencil hollies in the corner here, which have a really beautiful upright columnar growth habit. So if you have a more modern aesthetic, or if you wanted to put one of these on either side of a front porch to kind of serve as an exclamation point or focal plant, these would be great. These sky pencil hollies like full sun, and they prefer to be in a well-draining soil. I actually lost a couple this winter because of 2 things. They sat in a bed that maybe got a little bit too much moisture and it made them unhappy, and they also got a lot of cold winter wind, which gave them a lot of burn. So if they're in a protected location, well-draining soil, full sun, they'll do great. And they're also pretty deer resistant. The deer did not touch them in my garden, and they're pretty hardy. I want to say they're hardy in zones like 5 through 8 or 9. They get to be 6 to 10 feet in height and only about 3 to 4 feet in width. So nice, compact, upright shrub. and some evergreen ground covers, which I love because ground covers over time will have you mulching less because as they grow, they spread and they cover the soil, keeping weeds down and the soil cool. And what I love about evergreen ground covers versus the perennial ground covers is that the perennials, while I like them, they do die down in the winter and come back in spring, where these are your ground cover all year round and you'll have something pretty to look at in the winter. So these here are the creeping juniper all gold. They have some gold tips, a little bit of green, very pretty. They like full sun, and in fact most evergreens that have a golden or blue color will have the best color in full sun. I do not find that the deer touch this in my garden, and this one here gets to be about 4 to 5 feet in diameter, but only about 12 inches or so in height. And this is a number 3 container for $26.98. Some more really pretty evergreens, and I have both of these in my garden, so let me share my experience with them. So this one here is the Fire Chief arborvitae, Fire Chief Tuja. It has a rounded growth habit, and in the winter it gets the most beautiful kind of bronze color. Some people might think that it looks like the shrub is dying, but it isn't. It's just its winter color. And when the temperatures start to warm up in spring and in summer, they turn the most beautiful shade of chartreuse with these almost like orangey coral tips. Stunning. Pretty compact, grows in a round habit about 4 by 4. You can see there. And it is deer resistant in my garden, hardy in zones 5 through 9. And I have it planted in a part sun, part shade location, and it's doing really well. So these here are number 3 containers for $29.98. And then this gorgeous blue beauty on the side of it, I have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with it. Love the color. Stunning. Love the growth habit, how it's nice and arching and graceful. Don't like the size. It is a really aggressive, fast grower and gets really large. So if you have a lot of space to cover, this would be excellent. But I planted it in a spot that I thought it was going to be a little more compact, which has me having to prune on it to keep it size controlled, which creates extra work. And none of us want extra work in the garden. We just want to enjoy it. So this is a juniper gray owl. It likes full sun, has a beautiful color, and it gets to be, see how this says 36 to 48 inches? I fell for that. It does not. It gets to be more like 10 to 12 feet in width because it grows really wide. And I would say maybe 4 feet in height. So if you have the space, you want a lot of area covered, this would be a great option. Otherwise, go for a smaller variety. This one here is $26.98 for the gray owl juniper. Some more beautiful evergreen ground covers. This is the blue rug juniper Wiltoni. I have some of these blue rug junipers in my garden as ground covers on a hillside, which is great because hillsides are difficult to mow. They don't retain mulch. So these also help with soil retention and prevent erosion to plant these evergreen ground covers. So this one here is pretty low growing, only gets to be about 6 inches in height, and it gets to be 4 to 6 feet in width. So pretty compact, grows wider than it does in height, and it is deer resistant and drought tolerant once established. Anytime you see something that says drought tolerant, that's usually after the plant has been in the ground for a couple of years, getting regular water and so forth. Then they can handle a little more drought conditions. But initially you do have to keep on top of watering and make sure that they're happy. Some dwarf arborvitae little giant. So these are a version of the green giant, but they're smaller and they grow in a rounded habit naturally, which is great because if you like a spherical or round shrub, but you don't want to have to prune on it like you would to keep its shape like a boxwood, you can go with something like this that naturally grows in that globe shape. $29.98. Now these get to be about 4 by 4. Yeah, it says 36-inch spacing. I've seen them anywhere between 3 and 4 feet in height and in width, and they're hardy, very hardy, down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And these are $29.98 for the dwarf arborvitae little giant. And some Taxus densiformis or yew. Now these are not very deer resistant. They are very soft to the touch, which you wouldn't think that they would be, but they are. And the deer do like to chomp on these. But there is the Japanese plum yew, which is more deer resistant. They make a really nice shrub hedge. Look at that, 36 to 48 inches in height and in width, hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit, and they like part sun. And these are $29.98. And another beauty, which is also pretty rare here. This is only the second year that I've seen these offered here at the Home Depot. It is the Cryptomeria Globosa Nana. Look at that. This is a stunning shrub. Also grows in a globe round sphere habit. Gets to be 24 to 36 inches in diameter. It is deer resistant. It says garden showpiece, and it needs 30 to 42 inch spacing, hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Likes part sun. That is a beauty. Look at that. These Cryptomeria globosa also get more like a lighter green with a bit of a chartreuse tip that has a bit of an orange or coral color tip. Very pretty, very similar to the Fire Chief arborvitae, and they're a number 3 container for $34.98. 100% do not buy these. $15 for a bowl of lettuce. You can buy a pack of seeds for less than $2 and sprinkle them on the soil. This is probably like the gateway vegetable to grow. Super easy to grow lettuce. And it's cut and come again, so you can just cut off of it and it'll grow more foliage until it gets too hot. Lettuce likes the temperatures in the spring, nice and cool. When it gets too hot, the lettuce will get bitter and then it'll bolt, which means it'll send up stalks with little blooms, and then you know that it's no longer any good. But $14.98 for a bowl of lettuce? No, thank you. I've been doing these videos for a couple of years now, and something that I continually hear from my regular viewers, you know who you are, and I love you guys, is that the price on perennials has gotten a little bit high. And I would say that there is some occasions of that happening, mostly when they make the containers really large. Like now they're offering perennials in these 3 containers, which are $19.98, where most people would prefer a smaller container that can then grow on in their garden and they can divide themselves, which makes gardening more affordable, right? Well, last year we saw that Proven Winners was bringing in some quart perennials at a great price for $7.98 for these really great plants. But now look at this. Home Depot has also brought back, or has included, some of these 4 containers for $5.98 in their house brand plants, which is excellent. Some of the quart-sized perennials they have in the Home Depot house containers. They have some of the Burgundy Glow Buggleweed, or Ajuga, which some of you have a love-hate relationship with Ajuga because you think it might be invasive, or perhaps it is in your region, but it's very dependent as to whether or not a plant is invasive in a certain area. You'd have to look that up to know. I will tell you that I have this in my garden. I love it, and it's been really well behaved for me thus far. They get these really beautiful purple blooms, which these are already starting to push out some blooms there, you can see, in the spring. And look at this foliage. It's variegated with a little bit of a burgundy hint. So this is a great ground cover. And as I mentioned before with the Evergreen ground covers, this is a perennial type ground cover. It dies back in the winter, comes back in the spring, stays through the next hard frost in the fall. And it covers a lot of area because it grows and covers the soil, which means over time you will have to mulch less. So $5.98 for those. They also have some garden pinks, which are dianthus or mini carnations. Really pretty blue-green foliage and the little blooms that haven't yet opened. And there's the Proven Winners quartz, which we saw for the first time last year, and this is a great option to have at $7.98 for a quart-sized container. Makes them very accessible and affordable for most people. They're easier to plant because it's a smaller container to start with. Great. So this variety is the Amazing Daisies Daisy May. So they have a couple of newer varieties this year. Last year we found some Pig Squeak and some Coral Jade Sedum, and there were a couple of other things. They might have even had some Dianthus, but I think it was a hotter pink. This year they have this one called Sweetie Pie, which is a lighter pink. And another Proven Winners 4-quart container that they had last year that's come back, and it's a great one. It's the Cat's Pajamas Nepeta. Now this is also known as catmint, and it is a great option compared to some of the bigger varieties that you see, like the traditional Walker's Low. This Cat's Pajamas variety is more compact, staying only about 12 to 14 inches in size. Look at that. I have this all along my front walkway border, and it is perfect. I have this mixed with some salvia. The salvia is darker purple. This is lighter, and it coordinates beautifully with my double pink knockout roses. They bloom around the same time and look stunning together. So they like full sun, 12 to 14 inches height and in width. So nice compact little mound, and they are hardy in zones 3 through 8 or down to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. And they're deer and rabbit resistant. Because they have a little bit of a fragrance, they are off-putting to critters. Some Home Depot perennials in their #1 containers for $9.98, and they have another beautiful spring bloomer, which is the columbine. These are still all closed up, but these are a great pollinator friendly plant. And look at the foliage. It has really beautiful foliage as well. Look at that. These come in lots of different colors. This one has kind of a rose coloring, but they also come in shades of blue. And this one is called the Kirigami Rose and Pink Columbine. They like part sun, they are deer resistant, great for rock gardens, which means that they like a soil that leans dry, similar to a sedum. Anytime that you see something advertised for a rock garden, you know that it is a pretty drought tolerant plant that likes a well-draining soil. And these get to be 16 to 18 inches in height, needs 12-inch spacing, hardy to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. it was Lithidora because it also has those little blue blooms, but it's actually Speedwell, Georgia Blue, Oxford Blue, Veronica, and very pretty. Look at that. And let's see how big this gets. It might be a ground cover. Yeah, only 4 inches in height, but 12 to 24 inches in width. So I would say this would serve more as a ground cover. Blooms early spring through summer. Hardy down to -10 degrees Fahrenheit. English daisies, which also would look really cute in a spring arrangement. They have them in shades of pink as well as white. And there's even some light pink over there. And look how pretty they look next to this dianthus. This one's called Bright Light. And it also has that silvery blue foliage with these hot pink blooms. $9.98 for those. And one of my personal favorite spring bloomers, Candy Tuft, also known as Iberis. Look at that. Gorgeous, deer resistant, drought tolerant, full of blooms. And look how gorgeous these look together. Oh, so pretty. I am a big fan of using perennials in containers because then once I'm done using them in the container, I can always plant them out in the landscape. So I find it a great investment over buying a lot of annuals. And I do buy annuals, but I also really love perennials in containers. And Candy Tuft, after I used them in my containers last year, I went ahead and I planted them along my front walkway, and they are starting to get all nice and green, and I think they'll look beautiful. This out, if you watched my channel over the weekend, I visited a local to me nursery where I purchased a euphorbia that was called Miner's Merlot, I believe is the name of it. Well, it looks very similar to this in foliage, and this is gorgeous. Also known as Japanese Spurge. Now, you can be careful with this because if you cut it or if it breaks off, it sometimes emits a little sap that can be a little bit skin irritant, but otherwise it is very pretty, and it gets these really cool little chartreuse blooms in the spring. So a very interesting plant. Now let's see what variety this is. This one is called Purple Wood Spurge Euphorbia. Oh, Miner's Merlot, look at that. Same type I just bought. $10.98 for this one. And it's drought tolerant, attractive foliage, multi-stemmed, and it likes full sun. Look at this. Quart size perennials in the Creeping Phlox Drummond's Pink. This is amazing. So you can just pick up a couple of these. They spread really well, and what a great price. Easier to plant too, smaller root ball all around. Really great option. Here is another buggleweed or ajuga ground cover. This one is the chocolate chip, which has smaller foliage, a darker foliage, but also these spike type blue blooms in spring. Very pretty. Part sun, deer resistant, $5.98 in the quart size Home Depot house containers. Literally the most exciting time of the year for a gardener. I love when these tables start filling out again. And some gorgeous woodland phlox. Now the difference between woodland phlox and the creeping phlox that we took a look at earlier is that woodland phlox likes to be in a woodland or a more shaded area. So these are more of a shade tolerant phlox, where most garden phlox does like full sun. So this one here gets to be 10 to 12 inches in height and needs 12 to 15 inch spacing and hardy down to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. I did have some of this in my garden. I did find that it got eaten by something. I don't know if it's the deer, the bunnies, or both, but really beautiful, kind of like a periwinkle or like lavender purple. $9.98 for these. And some dianthus that's in bloom in this pretty shade of pink, and you can see how beautiful pink coordinates with purple. They've actually lined these up perfectly where all of these beautiful colors are so complementary to each other and opposite the color wheel. So if you like cool colors, things like yellows and purples and pinks look really pretty and cohesive together. This is one of my favorite perennials. This is a workhorse. This plant is the pincushion flower, a type of scabiosa that is a short-lived perennial. And when you talk about perennials, they're usually a plant that will come back year after year. But when you talk about a short-lived perennial, that is one that might return for 2 or 3 years and then not return again. So it has a shorter lifespan, but it is still worth having this one in the garden because it delivers some serious flower power. This will start blooming for me in spring in my garden and will bloom all the way through the end of October when we have our first hard frost. And it is always loaded with pollinators, and there's never a shortage of blooms coming up right behind the ones that are currently in bloom. Look at all these buttons. These are all blooms that are getting ready to open up. So this is a wonderful plant. Let me show you the information on it. Stays pretty low growing. I would say about 12 inches. Yeah, 12 to 18 inches in height, 12 to 15 inch spacing, hardy down to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. Super easy to deadhead. You just follow the stem down to the bottom, cut it off once it's done, and it will keep pumping out more blooms. Yellow plant here is tickseed or coreopsis. This one's looking a little bit messy, but all you have to do is cut off all of the spent blooms, and look at that. You still have a bunch of more blooms coming up behind them. These also bloom for a really long time. I have a light yellow variety in my garden called Moonshine. It is so pretty. It's like a very light buttery yellow versus this one that's more of a golden yellow. Some more Nepeta. This one here is called Persian Blue, and it looks like it's also a compact variety, only 16 to 18 inches in height and in width, hardy down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit, and blooms early summer through fall. Now what's great about Nepeta is that these are also a powerhouse when it comes to blooms. All you have to do is take off the spent blooms and it will keep reflushing with more blooms. I find that the first round of flowers is more prolific and the plant is fuller, but if you do cut it, you still get more blooms throughout the rest of the season, just maybe not as full as the first flush. And then some daisies, which are a quintessential garden perennial. This one is the Shasta daisy, gets 14 to 18 inches in height and 12 to 14 inch spacing, hardy down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit. Now when it comes to Shasta daisies, there's quite a few of them out there. Some of them get quite tall. The ones in my garden get to be 24 to 30, 32 inches in height. So I would say somewhere between 2 and 3 feet. Sometimes they require staking if they are in a spot that gets a little bit windy, or maybe that they're not getting quite as much sun, which could make them a little floppy. And they're also great self-seeders. So once you have daisies, they drop seed and you get more daisy babies. So they are definitely a plant that just keeps on giving. Here's a really beautiful and interesting variety of catmint. Look at this yellowy chartreuse foliage. That is so pretty. And this Nepeta or catmint is called Chartreuse on the Loose. What a great name. $9.98 for these containers. There is the Lithodora. You can see how it could be confused as the same plant because the Lithodora is here and the Speedwell we looked at is there. So very similar. These also have really tiny, adorable blue blooms. And let's see what the range of zones is on this one. Hardy down to -20 degrees Fahrenheit. And it gets 6 to 12 in height and 12 to 18 inches in width. Another excellent ground cover. This is another favorite in my garden, the Purple Dragon Dead Nettle or Lamium. Look at that. It gets these really large silvery leaves. Look at this, they're gorgeous. After it blooms, the leaves get a lot larger, and that happens with a lot of plants, things like Brunnera that happens to as well. And so this one here gets these little purple blooms, purple pink, and they're also sporadic reblooming. So throughout the whole season, you'll get a few blooms here and there. Deer resistant, I do find that the deer do not touch them. Part sun, they like a moist but very well draining soil, and they get to be 4 to 8 inches in height and spread very well. 10 to 14 inch spacing, hardy down to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. I literally just take chunks of mine and plug it somewhere else where I want it, and it starts to root right in the soil. Very easy to divide and move around in the garden. I know you hear me talking about plants I like, but here's one I don't really like. This is actually blue fescue, and I think it's really cute at this stage where it looks like a little blue mound of grass, but as they grow, they kind of look dry and like hay, and I find them less attractive. But this one here, they do have it, the blue fescue, Elijah Blue, for $10.98. And some gorgeous pansies, number 6 size container or 6-inch container for $3.98. Look at that. So pretty. And another really cool Proven Winners quart-sized plant that I actually tried last year in a bigger container, but this is great that they have this selection this year in a smaller size. This is the Fun and Games I Spy Heucherella. It has such a gorgeous foliage. Look at this. It's green with this red veining. This would look really pretty planted alongside that Miner's Merlot euphorbia that we took a look at outside, because it would coordinate nicely with the red foliage of that plant. So pretty. And then you get these spike blooms atop the plant that the pollinators really like, but if you don't like them, you can cut them off and just grow it as a foliage plant. That's what it looks like there. So the mound of foliage is about 8 to 10 inches in height and in width, and then they get a little bit taller with the bloom spikes. And it is hardy in zones 4 through 9. What's great about these tags as well is that they will tell you what to pair plants with. So if you're ever not sure how to combine your plants, look here for some inspiration. It says pair with daylilies, hosta, lugularia, bee balm, speedwell, and ferns. They also have these 6 packs of pansies for $8.98, so that makes it just over $1 a plant. Not bad. I'm growing pansies from seed right now, and I will tell you, they are easy to grow from seed, but they take a really long time to start blooming, and you have to baby them for months. So this is looking like a really a better deal at this point. When you're looking at these pansies, you might notice that a couple of them look a little bit damaged like this. That's just because the weather has still been a little bit up and down, some really cold nights, some warmer days. So all you have to do is just deadhead these, cut them off, and there is no shortage of blooms coming up right behind them. So these are perfectly good and healthy plants. Calla lilies. While these here in my zone are supposed to be annuals, if you plant them in a microclimate or somewhere in a protected location, usually along a foundation where they get the warmth from the house and some sun, they can sometimes come back. And they have some beautiful ones here, these wine colored ones, and look at those yellow ones with a peach tip. Some real beauties. So pretty. $19.98 for these pots of calla lilies. They also make a great hostess gift if you're going somewhere on Easter. And look at this deal that my store has, a number 8 or an 8-inch container of pansy planters, 2 for $10. And look at this steal of a deal, 5 for $5 on these 4-inch containers. It looks like the pansies. I don't see pansies here, but I do see seed geraniums, and they have some of this red-orange color, some white ones, and they also have pink. Look at that. These are so beautiful. Their foliage is stunning. So $1 for a 4-inch container, amazing. And Dusty Miller also 4-inch containers for $1. Now this is a wonderful texture and color foliage plant that does really well in the cool temperatures of spring. It does well in summer and in the fall. And in some areas, this is even hardy enough to overwinter if you don't have a really cold winter. So really great plant and really great price. I can't even believe it. So 5 of these for $5. And I found the pansies. Look at this. $1 for this. Gorgeous. They have this color, some burgundy, some purple. Really great price. If you haven't done any spring containers yet, now is a perfect time to get that done. Some pansies with some of that Dusty Miller would look really beautiful. They also have some of this white speedwell, whitewater it's called, the Veronica hybrid. It looks very much like a bacopa, doesn't it? But it would be more of a perennial version and a ground cover. Very pretty. Well, this brings us to the end of the April inventory here at my Home Depot. I hope that you've enjoyed checking out what my store has in stock, and I hope that you can find some of these varieties near you. Thank you for spending your time with me, and I will catch you in the next one.